I don't know. This way of life that y'all are living right now doesn't align with my memories of growing up in California.
It's bad. California right now is an absolute disaster, and that's not hyperbole. 10 years ago, it wasn't as in your face. Right now, it is. If you had to describe this to someone who's never been to America and you told this story about you had this once wonderful place and now it is completely littered and peppered with not just homeless people, but insane people. And I don't mean this as a subjective statement, but people who are quite literally clinically insane, running through streets, drugged out, crazed, naked, holding weapons, machetes, terrorizing people. People would have a hard time believing it. And that's the reality of California right now.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
So that is Chef Andrew Gruel, who is our guest today. And I met him on the set of Gutfeld. He and I were guests together, and I was so impressed with this guy. We have a lot in common. He's in California. I am not, but I grew up there, as most of you know, and he is a restaurateur and chef there. And politically, we're pretty well aligned. But he is staying in California and, as you hear, just sort of suffering through what Gavin Newsom is doing and has done to this once great state. So we have to ask the question, how can Gavin Newsom even think about running for the White House? More than that, how can anyone think of voting for this man, given his record in California? Plus, the chef will give some tips for the 4th of July that are very easy. Lots to get to. Minimum wage, business, the restaurant landscape, California, Gavin Newsom, Trump, tips, you name it. We're going to get to it with Chef Gruel in just a moment. First, though, I want to talk to you about priority gold. Economists are warning that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. With inflation on the rise, they may tell you it's slowing, but that's like saying you're still gaining weight, you're just not gaining it as fast. So inflation continues to be an issue, and global uncertainty is constantly looming. So it's clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't had your eye on gold, time to make it a priority. And I urge you to call my friends at Priority Gold to find out how they can help you diversify your savings with physical gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD. or visit prioritygold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree, folks, that physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings, no matter the economic climate. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist, or visit prioritygold.com/golden to learn more. 1-800-405-GOLD or prioritygold.com/golden. Up next, Chef Andrew Gruel. Andrew, it is so great to see you again. As we head into this holiday weekend, I'm just going to tease again that you're going to share a good 4th of July recipe with us. But let's just start with you being the entrepreneur extraordinaire that you are in the state of California. It's just, how did you decide to become a chef?
It was almost by accident, serendipity, if you will. I was going to college studying philosophy and piano performance, actually, at a small liberal arts college up in Maine.
Wow.
Small college up in Maine. After high school, I was an athlete, and I was spending all of my time working in restaurants, actually. I spent more time ultimately working in restaurants than I started to spend in school. And I said to myself, you know what, maybe this is what I want to do. Because I ultimately got the restaurant job as for just like side money, et cetera.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'd always been working in restaurants. That was always I did that in high school. So after 2 years in college, I left and I entered the, culinary hospitality workforce, and then ultimately became a full-time thing. I went back to school, got my culinary arts degree, food marketing, business degree, et cetera. But that was it. It was never really the plan.
It's incredible to me because it seems like one of the most difficult industries ever in the universe, being a restaurateur, building successful restaurants that stand the test of time. And you've done that. So am I wrong? How difficult is this as a career?
It's very difficult. I think, there's a lot of numbers out there, like 75% of all restaurants fail. There's been a bunch of studies. Some of those numbers are a bit inflated. I think ultimately, though, the reason so many restaurants seem to fail is because there are so many restaurants. It's also the one industry where everybody feels like, okay, I can do that, right? I have a great recipe. I can open a restaurant. They don't necessarily understand. If you love teeth, you don't just automatically think, I'm going to be a dentist or I can be a dentist.
Wow, what else would you do if you love teeth? Though?
Yeah,
I don't know if that analogy works, Andrew. I'm just going to go out on a limb.
I was going to say that might be an odd one, but it's like there in any industry, it's not like you can just dive into it the next day. But a lot of people do get into restaurants who just otherwise don't understand the ins and the outs. But it is a very tough industry. It's 24/7. We work when everybody else is partying, right? Holidays, birthday, anything, you're working, everybody else is having a good time, and it's pretty intense.
So why is that attractive to you? Why do you enjoy it so much with all that you sacrifice?
I think it's number one, it's the people, right? Both internal and external. So I always joke, I say that working in a restaurant is like a pirate ship. You have people from all different walks of life. And a lot of times, many of them are outcasts, right? Like it's such an interesting and odd group of people that come together for that one moment service, which could be that one game, right? Like the Super Bowl, whether it's Thanksgiving service or whatever it is. And everybody puts aside whatever they know, who they are, what they like, what they don't. And they're just focused on that one service. And it's really cool how you can do that. Because if you think about it, the people that work in the restaurant, right? People in the kitchen are people who maybe have no job experience, people who've worked in kitchen for 30 years, high school kids who get in there, front of the house, it's struggling actors and actresses, part-time people who have part-time jobs, full-time mothers, it's all of these random people that come together. And then from the perspective of the customer, I just love engaging with people and understanding and trying to create art on a plate over and over and over again. But then there's also like the mathematics of it. I do have somewhat of a mathematical mind and is doing all of that, but also trying to do it in a way that you can make a little bit of money and you can actually scale your concept if that's your goal, or you can at least succeed long enough to have a restaurant for more than 5 years or more than a year. Heck.
I mean, your success level is crazy to me. You're sort of an outlier, but maybe I don't know. I was just in Portugal recently, not to sound like I'm this world traveler, but my best friend moved to Portugal, a small beach town called Tavira in the Algarve in Portugal. And we would walk around and look at the number of these little restaurants, right? And maybe they had one table full or a couple tables. And then the next restaurant maybe was packed. And we would ask ourselves, how are these guys or gals surviving? How do they all survive? And I guess, like you said, eventually there's a shakeout, right? And the ones who just can't survive are going to fold.
Exactly. And in the case of those restaurants where one or two tables are full and next to a restaurant that's, blasting, a lot of times what will happen is they'll just be mom and pops kind of working the restaurant and trying to survive as long as they can, hoping that one day somebody comes in and writes that review, or 3 tables fill up, 4 tables fill up, but then it becomes a family restaurant. They don't pay employees, especially in the case of Portugal. What's really interesting, you say Portugal, is because we actually traveled there last summer as well. And we did notice that there were so many restaurants, as you just mentioned, and we looked into the economics of running a restaurant in Portugal. And a lot of times, number one, it's like you don't have these crazy high labor costs, the unions that are just driving the cost of labor to a point of not being able to succeed unless you're a massive corporation. So, and they're family run restaurants. And you see the same thing even in like Mexico when you go down there, and it's just the one restaurant, it's the family's restaurant. And a couple dollars a day, and ultimately they grow it. So I think that's also something that's really cool about food in the restaurant industry, is the way in which it can be rooted to kind of your entire lineage.
Okay, so you mentioned costs and the high costs of union, and we know out in California where you're based that fast food restaurants, the minimum wage was jacked up. How does that impact you and your type of restaurant?
Well, so this is For us specifically, because right now I had a concept that we had sold a couple years ago. We had 30 plus locations. We understood the way in which all of those laws that targeted only multi-unit restaurants actually were designed to distill down to the independent restaurant. So right now we've only got one restaurant, but it still affects us. And we have a full service fine dining restaurant after we sold that other concept. So how does it affect us? Well, if you think about it, right, the large multi-unit restaurants that are targeted in this bill, and the reason they're targeted in this bill is because it's much easier to get public support. This blind corporation who's got all these profits and pays their CEO millions and millions of dollars, we're going to, damn the man, we're going to give it to them. Yeah. Well, those restaurants make up a majority of the restaurant landscape. When you're paying those workers $20+ an hour, well, the independent restaurant now has to increase their wages to meet that $20+ an hour.
To compete for the employee.
Exactly, to compete for the employees and to not look like the outlier. And a lot of people will say, well, that's great. Then everybody's got to pay more. Okay, well, take, for example, right now, our restaurant. So we pride ourselves on paying much more than minimum wage. It's built into our business model. Ever since I opened in 2011, we don't even think about minimum wage. But the reason that affects us is that so minimum wage where I am, it's about, I don't even remember. That's the funny thing, $15 to $16 an hour. So we pay right now, our workers make between $20 and $30 an hour. And they also, all the front of the house workers make another $50 to $60 an hour in tips. That's not a lie. And the idea that we're paying so much above minimum wage, we now need to increase well above the $20 floor versus the $15 floor. So effectively, we do still need to increase another $5, even though we were already paying that much, because we want to hold ourselves that much higher. And then you got to do the same with teachers. You got to do the same across all industries, because now if you can make $20 an hour to punch in a couple burgers at McDonald's, and a teacher's making $24 an hour, well, they've got to go up another $8, $9, $10 an hour, or else guess what? They'll drop a couple dollars an hour to just go work a much easier job.
What is the ideal scenario? For me, it's keep government out of deciding who gets paid what. But I do understand we've been dealing with minimum wage since I've been alive. So, which is a long time. So, what is the ideal scenario? How much should government be, in your opinion, dictating what you pay your employees?
Government shouldn't be involved at all, because every single time they get involved, they end up screwing the equation. So we could go into millions of examples as to how, but I will say this. The way in which you give the workers more money is to cut payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are astronomical, and in all the states in which they're implementing these outrageous non-market minimum wages, the payroll taxes are also the highest. I do firmly believe that employees should have more money in their pockets in order to stimulate, prime, and pump the local economies. But the way in which you do that is by cutting those payroll taxes. If you can't agree that cutting the payroll taxes is the way, because perhaps you need that money in the local or the state government coffers, well, then create a new incentive structure. That's always what I propose. It's all about the incentive structure. So, for example, if you want these large multi-unit corporations to be paying, let's say, $20, $25 an hour, well, you should create a tier system where you say, okay, if you pay $20 an hour, your payroll taxes are now going to come down to this particular number, so that it's a net zero to change to the bottom line of the business. And they're incentivized to pay more, but then it's the same for them. And then as more businesses do that by virtue of a new incentive system, well, then that's a great way to naturally increase the wages in the market, or to put more money in the pockets of the workers, and you cut the payroll tax.
So let me ask a really stupid question. Why doesn't that happen? Is it too cynical to say, well, politicians are never going to cut a tax if they don't have to?
I don't think that's cynical. I think at this point, that's a mathematic reality, because our governments have gotten so big and so involved in our daily lives in regards to also taking our money, that they've run these budgets like they're taking out loans from a loan shark at the roulette table. and they can't even come close to covering them. They're not even trying to cover the existing budgets anymore. It's almost like they're covering the projected hole on the next budget 5 years out. So we're so far in the hole that every single dollar, there is the idea that they would cut taxes at this point in any capacity is not even a mathematic reality in their minds, especially in states like California. So, to consider this more nuanced economic equation whereby there's more money in the economy, therefore people will spend more and sales tax will go up, so it'll actually help the government. Their brains can't even think in that regard.
Back to our conversation with Andrew Gruel in just a moment. But, at the heart of our democracy lies a principle we hold sacred, and that is free speech. He's a great example of someone speaking his mind freely. Free speech is the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. But in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives. And that leaves a lot of you feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. And this is where wealth protection research steps in, armed with a mission that has never been more critical. Wealth protection research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to the silenced. Wealth protection research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election, which just got a little more uncertain. Wealth protection research has created a 2024 election wealth protection report. This free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it for free by texting IDEAS to 76626. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to get your free copy of this 2024 election protection report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, but you can, and to take control of our financial destiny. So text IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy now.
To consider this more nuanced economic equation whereby there's more money in the economy, therefore people will spend more and sales tax will go up, so it'll actually help the government. Their brains can't even think in that regard.
Does that ever astonish you that the short-sightedness of politicians, or the single-mindedness maybe, that they don't really think about this massive debt they're accruing, and they don't think about what that means for, say, national security or anything else. They just want their projects done. That's what it feels like to me. What do you think?
I'll even get a bit more cynical. They want their projects done and they want to be able to buy more votes, right? So this need for power, this hunger, this lust for power, and the positions in which they're in, they know they have to maintain that. So it's kind of like, it's like the junkie who's got his hit, but he's now thinking about his next hit, right? So they've got us and they've taxed us down to the last dollar in our wallet, but they know, oh, well, I also have to get voted in so that I can keep doing this, right? I need this high, and the high is their power. So they're thinking about, okay, well, I also need to be able to tax people to get the projects, to pretend to give the money away for the people whose votes that I need to get me back into this position of power. So it's this very, very convoluted, and I talk about the incentive structure. It's an evil and toxic incentive structure. But where does it end, right? That's the question.
That's the question.
And you look at California, it's this never-ending black hole. And there's a certain point at which they can't continue taxing, and it's a house of cards. And I think we're there, or we're at least on the doorstep. Whether it's tomorrow or next year, we're getting close.
I want to get to California with you more in depth, but you mentioned tips earlier, and Donald Trump was in Nevada saying, "Hey, we don't want to tax your tips." Tips are taxed in California, correct?
Yeah. I don't think people realize that. Tips are taxed at the same rate as payroll. So if somebody makes an extra $50 an hour in tips, which happens at our restaurant, and we pay them, let's say $20 an hour, we're taxed on $70 an hour. And the team member is too. That's important, because when we put all the tips on paychecks now, because you have to, because the IRS, they'll come after you for any kind of cash handling. And everyone's like, but I made, $1,000 in tips, but I only got 650 on my paycheck. I'm like, yeah, it's called taxes.
Yeah, wake up, people.
Yeah.
This is what you're voting for when you continue to vote for people who want to just keep taxing you. How do you think that line that Trump doled out in Nevada is going over with people in your service industry? That if you don't want tips taxed, you got to vote Trump.
I think two things, right? So great question, because I always wonder how these messages, which are very, very easy to receive, and who would be against that, whether they get to the average man and woman. I think the media has been filtering that story so well, because I brought it up with a lot of the people in my restaurant and they knew nothing about it, right? And they were like, oh, really? And I actually got into detail and went into detail with them about it. And they were like, oh my God, that would be amazing. And I would have so much more money in my pocket, and I could pay rent earlier, and I could my car payment and save money for this and that. So like immediately their wheels started spinning as to how much money they could save if that was the case, but they otherwise didn't know about it. So I think generally though, if everybody did get that story, I think it would be like, maybe you'd have like 1% of people who just didn't even understand money. But 99% of the industry would be elated.
Okay, California. I was born and raised there. My mom died at the age of 92 back in October, lived her whole life in California, born and raised, taught in the public school system, et cetera, et cetera. And it's been devastating for us to watch what my dad always called, especially he grew up in San Francisco, the jewel of the Western Hemisphere, devolve into these crime-ridden areas. I went to Berkeley, and I used to ride my moped to work in Oakland, and I can't imagine doing that now and feeling safe about it. Oakland has gone so far afield, and it's devastating to watch. What is it like to be there right now? Like, what is the sense in California about, Governor Gavin Newsom says, oh, they're attacking our California way of life. I don't know. This way of life that y'all are living right now doesn't align with my memories of growing up in California.
It's bad. California right now is an absolute disaster, and that's not hyperbole. 10 years ago, I've always held these political views, so I'm very in tune to the way in which policy affects local communities, cities, suburban areas outside of cities. It wasn't as in your face. Right now, it is. If you had to describe this to someone who's never been to America, and you told this story about you had this once wonderful place and now it is completely littered and peppered with not just homeless people, but insane people. And I don't mean this as a subjective statement, but people who are quite literally clinically insane, running through streets, drugged out, crazed, naked, holding weapons, machetes, terrorizing people in cities, in normal cities that once were abundant with tourists and, families and children walking around, shopping, beautiful cities, that people would have a hard time believing it. And that's the reality of California right now. We live in Huntington Beach, the area, which is really, on a good day, it could be a 40-minute drive from the heart of Los Angeles to Huntington Beach. You would think that they were not just two different states, that they were almost two different countries, because of the way in which Huntington Beach runs its city, a city of 250,000+ people, and the way Los Angeles is overseen and run. Now, both of those areas, of course, are overseen by Governor Gavin Newsom. So one would imagine that there wouldn't be such a disparity when it comes to local politics. Well, Huntington Beach has really fought the fight hard against Newsom. And as a result of that, Newsom is suing the city of Huntington Beach, which is a charter city, on multiple fronts. So Huntington Beach is kind of the, hey guys, we're still there. We're still trying to be a beautiful city, but we're being torn apart. And now the state is coming after the city of Huntington Beach so hard for just trying to be safe, for trying to be clean, for trying to have some sort of a standard and a moral fabric associated with the city. And they want to tear it apart, because every other city in California, especially those that have even given in a little bit to Newsom's progressive insanity have completely fallen apart into a dystopian nightmare.
I've been thinking about this a lot. And I keep asking the question, what is wrong with wanting a safe, beautiful city in which to live, where people love taking their families out, feel comfortable doing so, where the schools are good, where they're not ideological, where they're just teaching kids to function in the world, to be able to read, to be able to write, to be able to, identify things on a map. This beautiful picture that was once California. What was wrong with that? Like, it seems to me like the other side, this quote unquote progressivism, is so hell bent on defending criminals, on defending homeless people, and look, some of that we can help take care of, but it almost seems as though they want this, like they think this is a more equitable society, to let the very worst of us kind of permeate the whole and bring down the level, the standard of living. I don't know how to get my head around it any other way.
Yeah, and I've thought about this long and hard, right? I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I trade in an industry in which the ideas and the thoughts are so diverse. So it's not like I'm a pundit and I kind of live in this political system in which it's an echo chamber. I mean, I hear so many different ideas, and I want to believe that there's good intention behind all of this. And I've distilled it down to this one common denominator, and it is the idea that politics have become so important in our everyday lives, almost like sport. And I say this, coming out of the pandemic, when they shut sports down, right? So many people turned to politics as sport. People who otherwise had never knew nothing about politics. They couldn't even tell you who their local and state reps were. When they shut down basketball, when they shut down hockey, everything, all those people who once went out and wore the jerseys in the back with the name of the player that they loved, it became Pelosi. It became Trump, right? And it happened on both sides. I think it happened more on the left than it did on the right. And all of those people have now turned politics into sport to the degree that it's amplified the platform, especially of the progressives, to that it's a cult. And a cult like a religion. Yeah. So if you give in, right, if suddenly you say, you know what, we tried this experiment with crime, let's use that as an example, right? Prop 47 in California, AB 109, which was the prison realignment bill, which basically put people out on the streets. We tried this and it didn't work. If you say it didn't work, you are now basically losing your whole worldview because that religion is a lie. And they have to be, that religion has to remain. So no matter what evidence there is out there saying that this doesn't work, it's their identity. So anyone who believes in this platform, if you tell them that it's wrong or there's evidence proving that it's wrong, it's like telling somebody who's religious that you just found out the Bible was fake, right? Yeah. I mean, it's to that degree of insanity. So those are the followers. And then on the top, what I've learned in California is that it is nefarious, right? A lot of the political leaders firmly want to destroy the system upon which America has been living for so many years and replace it with so much crime and insanity that people scream for the government to come and save them and help them. And that's the way in which this fundamental switch is made. And it starts in California.
It's interesting that you brought up the word religion, because I do think for many people, like you said, government is replacing religion. We've become a more secular society, and I'm not uber religious, but I have my spiritual beliefs. And what I think is we see this commitment to religion, to Christianity, whatever, declining. And instead this turn to, we can look at the way that Barack Obama was treated as almost this Messiah-like person that was going to come save America, when in fact it's us, the people, that are supposed to be saving America. Yes, we elect a president, and yes, that president leads, but it became this sense of religion. And on the left, they'll say the Donald Trump supporters are a cult. They will come right out and call anyone who supports Donald Trump like a cultist, deranged, need to be reprogrammed, etc. And this is nuts. And, it's really interesting. And maybe we're in a period of time where this is just going to be the way it is until somehow the dust settles. But it really does feel like, I think you're right. And I think the bigger the government, the smaller the individual. You become so much less important when you give so much weight to the government who tells you what to do, who incentivizes you with taxes or lack of taxes, who sets these rules. And I hope that COVID was a big wake-up call for a lot of people. And I hope what's going on with crime and the border is a big wake-up call. Let me get to the border in California. How are you feeling the effects of what appears to me to be a pretty wide-open border?
I feel the effects in two ways, right? So I will say this, and it's just the reality of the restaurant industry. There's been this quasi-open border in California. And I don't mean open border in the sense of what we see today. I mean, 30 years ago, you would have families that crossed over the border or came into America and never went back to Mexico and built families here. And then ultimately, many of them did go on to gain citizenship the right way. What that means is that they would work for a few years. They would develop a local community of supporters of citizens, whether it's restaurants or whatever job they're working. Then they would go back to Mexico. Then you remain in Mexico and you apply for your green card. You say, look, I did cross illegally. I got this, right? And then they come back and they ultimately get their citizenship here in the United States. That had been going on in this kind of like mixed fashion for decades. Those people, many of whom have been in the restaurant industry, who I've known for 10, 20 years. So when people are like, oh, they're stealing someone's social security number to work here, they're not actually. A lot of times what happens is they use their family member's name, and then that family member goes back to Mexico. So they are here illegally, but they're not stealing from somebody else by using a fake social security number. They're paying taxes, et cetera. That was kind of this common understanding in the restaurant industry for the 20 years in California. Now, those people hate what's happening at the border. So I think that's hilarious, right? So technically, illegals also hate illegals, right? It's the legacy legality. Because what's happening is there are people who are trying their hardest to work through the proper channels. Now, many of them did come here originally illegal, or they overstayed their stay and they had jobs, they paid taxes, they went back to Mexico. But now the influx of people coming in. But here's what I think is interesting. Everybody's like, well, a lot of these people are taking jobs. Well, not in areas that I'm seeing, right? They're not taking jobs. So what's happening is areas of these cities are getting completely over-inhabited, and there's a black market popping up where these people are starting like local food systems that are illegal, right? So taco stands, restaurants that are just strewn across the side of the road, and these people are creating a market within themselves. So a lot of the people that are crossing illegally are creating their own new communities, and they're getting a ton of government handouts, and it's affecting cities. So that's how it affects kind of my industry is that crime will go up exponentially on a number that's already 100x in the local cities. But then so therefore people won't go out to eat. They won't go near those restaurants, and people, and it hurts the businesses that are paying taxes that have been there for so long.
Oh my goodness. All right. After a quick break, we're going to talk a little food and get a recipe from Chef Andrew Gruel that you can do, I hope, because I'm terrible in the kitchen, Andrew. So you're going to really have to help me. 4th of July, right after this. I realize we're speaking to a chef, and I often eat chef-prepared, fresh curated, fresh designed, chef-crafted meals from Factor because they make it so easy. Look, we're facing these beautiful, warm, sunny days, and you want to fuel up for them with these no prep, no mess meals. This is your wellness goal coming to fruition in time for the rest of the summer, thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. And I don't exaggerate. I've got them in my fridge at all times. I just throw them in the microwave for 2 minutes and they are ready to roll. So head to factormeals.com/Tafoya50. Tafoya 50. Use code Tafoya50. Get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code Tafoya50 at factormeals.com/Tafoya50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Enjoy these effortless meals. Choose from 6 menu preferences. It'll help you manage calories. Again, go to factormeals.com/Tafoya50. Use that code Tafoya50. Get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. All right, Chef. If I am rudimentary in the kitchen to say the best. It's just, that's as good as I can be. So tell me something I can make for the festivities on Independence Day that won't kill me.
Well, I mean, I think generally, right, one of the things that I tell people is that cooking actually has been somewhat over intellectualized. It's really just it's just so if we're talking about like grilling and cooking meats and proteins, we can break it down to heat.
Okay.
And people think like, oh, you want to marinate for so long and you got to have this complicated marinade. And then you go on this high heat grill. It's actually, funny enough, it's the opposite. So I'll tell you a couple things. Number one, marinades actually don't penetrate meat scientifically. That's impossible.
When you say meat, do you mean steak, poultry, all of it?
All of it. It
Okay.
can't break the protein down. So what a marinade actually does is it just adds flavor to the exterior. So you only need it on there for like maybe 10 or 30 minutes at most.
So all of this soaking overnight in a marinade or for 2 hours is for naught?
It actually makes the meat mushy and it breaks it down too much. Now, the reason why people originally thought marinades were important is because there was salt in the marinades, many times in the form of actual salt or soy sauce or other ingredients that had salt. Now, salt over time is what you want, right?
Okay.
So you want that salt. What it actually does is it breaks down the meat. It goes inside the meat like osmosis. We learned this in 8th grade. Then it comes back out of the meat, but then it goes back into the meat. And each time that moisture is going in and out of the meat with the salt, it's breaking the proteins down, it's denaturing the proteins. So you're getting a more tender and seasoned product by virtue of that salt or the length of time.
Are you losing the protein?
No.
Okay.
It's because it's going back in,
okay.
right? So
just want to make sure.
The salt is like the bus, and it's just driving it's driving the moisture from the protein in the bus or with the bus in the meat, out of the meat, in the meat, out of the meat. And each time it's doing it, it's breaking the road down, and the road are the protein strands.
Okay.
So the secret there is that for your meats, just pre-salt them, and you can let them sit overnight, and it will make your meat amazing. And you don't need to spend all that time on the marinade, etc.
And how much salt are we talking? Because people will like encrust it with salt if they don't know anything.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just as if you were seasoning your meat like to cook.
Okay.
So that amount, no different, because the salt is pretty powerful. Now, if you do want to add a marinade, just add it like 20 or 30 minutes before you cook it, and that's just exterior flavor, which is good and it tastes good, but it's not going to break your meat down. When it comes to heat, you want to start actually on low heat and finish on high heat. So that's, once again, the opposite. I'm crushing all the ideas here that we knew to be true. I'm breaking up people's cults.
Yeah, he's like,
yeah.
Okay.
So you start on the low heat, and then you finish on the high heat. So if you have a grill going, kind of create one side where it's really low heat. You got your salted meat. Maybe you did rub it down with a little bit of fat and flavor. Throw it on the low heat grill and until it gets about 70% to where you want it finished. So if it's a filet and you want it cooked rare, just for a couple minutes on the low heat side, then go high heat at the very end as opposed to the beginning.
Okay.
If you're cooking a large roast, put it on there, low heat for hours. Then at the last minute or the last 5 minutes, really, really high heat, blast that heat up.
Okay.
So those are the 2 tricks that will make you the summer grilling expert.
How do you fall on salts that are flavored? Just like I was telling you, I was in Tavira, Portugal. They harvest salt there out of the ocean, and then a lot of times they'll take that salt and they'll flavor it up a little bit with, say, orange or even cinnamon or a variety of local flavors. Does that? Can you use that the same as you would use any other salt?
Yeah, definitely. And I absolutely love that too. And that's why the Europeans do have somewhat of an edge up on us when it comes to cooking is that they take simple ideas and they just amplify them a little bit, right? Like we had in America, we're like, oh, we have this 1,000 ingredient marinade.
Yeah.
And then there they just are like salt with a little bit of citrus zest. You're good to go.
I mean, the best stuff I ate over there, Andrew, was like, the freshly made bread with a little olive oil and maybe a flavored vinegar mixed in. It was like, I'm in heaven. I don't need more than that. That did strike me. And I've heard other people say it, that in Europe, food is cleaner. It's probably not that case in all parts of Europe, but certainly in these coastal towns where you catch your fish in the morning and you cook it for dinner that night, and all you do is grill it and maybe put some broccoli and potatoes, pesto potatoes on the side or something. It's the best.
Yep, you're right. It is like the big cities. You're still getting all the processed food, but you are 100% correct. In most of the smaller cities, towns, and all throughout Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc., it's still just very basic ingredients, and they're being cooked in a manner that is generational, right? So you don't have this production facility, and that's also why people who are gluten free or gluten sensitive, they can go to Europe and they can eat the bread, because they don't have the chemicals in there.
Okay.
And what happens is that and when I say the chemicals is that in America, they speed up the fermentation process by adding a lot of chemicals so that you can produce more bread in a shorter period of time, right? More product, more money.
Sure.
In Europe, they use a natural starter, which is just it's yeast that grows in the environment. It's flour and water that you let sit out for a couple days. It develops this yeast starter. And that's so they don't use an artificial yeast. That's what they make their breads with. Now, why that's important is that when you make a natural starter, it's really good on your stomach because it's got it doesn't break down the elements in your body that are like the healthy bacterias.
Right.
So you can absorb and digest that bread a lot better than you would some of that processed stuff.
All right, this is all very simple. Everyone should have been able to take notes and make the best, steak and dogs and burgers and chicken and salmon this holiday weekend. Again, let's talk free speech. It is the heart of our democracy. It is the cornerstone of every freedom that we cherish. But now we're living in a digital age. And so these discussions about our wealth and our rights and our future are often silenced, or they're overshadowed in mainstream narratives. And I know that leaves a lot of people feeling like they don't have a voice in these really important conversations about financial independence and security. And so this is where wealth protection research comes in. Wealth protection research isn't a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech, armed with a mission that's never been more critical, and that is giving a voice to the silenced. Wealth protection research seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge the prevailing narratives, especially as we're looking at this 2024 election, which is a crazy one to say the least. Wealth protection research has created a 2024 election wealth protection report. It is free. And it highlights the 3 best things for protecting and growing your money as we head into November. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and you can get it completely free by texting the word IDEAS to 76626, IDEAS. If you believe, as I do, in the absolute sanctity of free speech and in the importance of financial freedom, act now. Text IDEAS to 76626. Get your free copy of this 2024 election protection report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, not narrow it. It's time to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, but you can. And it's time to take control of our financial destinies. So text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy now. All right, look, before I let you go, we saw the debate. It was abysmal, and the reaction was even stronger than I expected, that from the Democrats, that, oh my gosh, we are in trouble. We cannot run this man. And this idea that, oh, we can't let 90 minutes define his presidency. Well, if he couldn't get up for that 90-minute period which may have been the most important 90 minutes of his first term, and deliver in a way that made people feel he was competent, I think you can say this is not a safe bet. So that one of the names, and we talked about him before, that is coming up and maybe a replacement candidate is Gavin Newsom. When you think of the idea of Gavin Newsom, the current governor of the state of California, and all that you've just told us, sitting in the White House, what does it bring up for you?
Disgust. I mean, you want to talk about weaponization of the Justice Department and lawfare. Gavin Newsom will bring that to a level that we have never seen before. And I know that from personal experience. Gavin Newsom being the president will be dangerous for Americans, that people on a level, if you speak out against the administration, and it's not that he's going to be the one driving all of that lawfare. The thing about Newsom is that he is so egotistical and everything has to be about him. And he has to win and he has to be in power and he will do whatever it takes. He doesn't have a political foundation, right? He'll go with whatever the way the wind blows. It's about him. That's all that it's about. It's pure narcissism. And he will do whatever it takes to get there. Now, I'm not suggesting there isn't other people like that in the party who act the same way. But I will say, people take like Bernie Sanders. The guy's crazy, but at least you know what his position is, right?
Yeah.
He has a consistent and solid platform. I don't agree with it, but he's consistent. Not Newsom. No. He has there's no foundation there. And I know that because in 2020, when things were crazy in California, and I doubt you remember this, but in 2020, I spoke out prior to me being much more political. I was on Food Network. I had TV experience, but I was very just in that world, quiet, moderate, seemingly middle of the road. I started speaking out. And I went on this tirade when Newsom shut down outdoor dining in California. And I said, and everyone was tweeting at me saying, you're an a-hole, you're an a-hole, you're an a-hole. And at the end of my tirade, I said, no, Governor Newsom's the a-hole. Because this was right after he had been to French Laundry and lied about it.
Yeah.
Every newspaper, New York Post, you name it, celebrity chef calls Gavin Newsom an a-hole, blah, blah, blah. I suddenly was on every TV show. I was the face of California, California politics related to COVID. Well, guess what? Guess what happened 6 days later? I got served a labor investigation in the state of California on every single LLC in which my name was on and my wife. Most of these LLCs didn't even have employees. There was no trigger. There was no complaint. It was a full-blown labor investigation. They subpoenaed 3 years of records. This went on for a year, just tying me up in 6 figures plus of legal fees. And what a complete, now, first of all, I had to get a high-powered attorney. Everyone was like, yeah, this is coming down from the governor's office. This is 100% political retribution. He is coming after you. There was no complaint. There was nothing that triggered this investigation. Guess what? When the recall got approved, the investigation suddenly went away. Is that not a coincidence? So this is the way in which he will treat a random restaurant owner who otherwise had no, experience, history, anything related to politics or his world, who just spoke out about him and happened to get a bit of attention because he was the, piece de resistance in regards to COVID. And he came after me, my family, my wife. She got subpoenaed on everything for no reason. They wrote letters. The labor commissioner wrote letters to every single one of our employees that we had for 3 years. That was thousands of employees, whether they worked for us for 5 minutes or 5 months, saying, basically leading letters with a form that was like, did they ever not let you take a break? Did they ever do this? And it was this long letter. I had letters sent out to thousands of employees as if they were just trying to conjure something up. And we had to spend over 6 figures to fight it. It almost took me down personally.
And that, to me, was probably the aim. They continue to try to take people down, beat them up legally until they can no longer afford it and just have to give in. We've seen a lot of that. This is not America. It's not the America I want to live in. It's not the America I grew up in, and it's disgusting. And I can't believe that happened to you. I'm glad you did it though, Andrew, because it just showed the courage that was needed at the time, and we need more of it. And so I'm happy to amplify that you called Governor Newsom an a-hole. And by the way, I concur. Come on after me, Governor. Come on. I don't care. Even though I don't live in California, but I once did. Oh gosh, I should think about my friends. Anyway, he is Chef Andrew Gruel. It's been so great to talk to you. I like to give people, I always say, be brave and do good. I'm going to say that your Governor a-hole comment was be brave. If you could tell people, suggest to people one thing they could do any day this week, this year, this month, whatever, to do good, what would you say?
Well, I think to do good, there's a lot of things we can do good just in our daily lives, right? Just the way in which we behave. I don't even think it's like one specific thing, but just engaging with people daily, being kind, opening doors for people, the little things, right? It's a lot of little things that lead up to a big thing. That way, nobody has to do one big thing,
right?
And that's what I try and teach my kids, just in general as they grow up. We talked about losing the moral fabric. That's what I'm talking about. So it's all those little things. It's all those little good things, but also, I think generally good in regards to what we're talking about, specifically topic related. If you believe in something and you feel, don't be annoying about it, but I do think you should talk about it, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are afraid to talk about the things in which they believe because they don't want to be canceled. And I can tell you this because there's a happy ending to that story with Newsom. When I did speak out, my business went up 100x. Right? I had people sending checks to the restaurant from like Michigan saying, "We support everything you do. Here's $100. Ring it in for whatever. Like, we just want to support you." So if you're firm in what you believe, you don't have to be an a-hole about it, but talk about it. And I think that we need more of that in society because people are so afraid to talk about what they believe in, that those who do are termed the maggots, right? Like the crazy cultists.
Yeah.
And those of us who actually just are reasonable and rational are sitting there quiet thinking, should I say anything?
Correct. Well, like any great chef, what you just did was took the two ingredients of my show, be brave and do good. You blended them into one nice little treat, and that's what everyone can do. He is Chef Andrew Gruel. We've been showing you all the ways that you can follow him on social and find him in California. And thank you so much for your time. Happy Independence Day.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor. I really appreciated it.
Great to talk to you. Be brave, do good. We'll see you next time.